Although national parks are some of the most beautiful places on the planet, the sad truth is that many people go missing in them. This leaves officials and family members desperately trying to find these individuals. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 mysterious national park disappearances. The disappearance of Keith Reinhard. The tiny village of Silver Plume in Colorado has a population of just over 200. It was the location solitude that enticed Keith Reinhard in 1988 to take a 3-month sabbatical from his job as a sports writer, leave his wife and family, and get some much-needed respite and work on his novel. Reinhard also saw the tiny village, which boasted mountainous areas, as an opportunity to overcome his lifelong fear of heights and get in better shape. When he arrived in Silver Plume, he leased a small shop to sell antiques and photographs to maintain him financially. It was then that Reinhard learned about the previous owner of the shop, a man called Tom Young, who on July 31st of the previous year went for a walk with his dog and never returned. A month into Reinhard's stay at Silver Plume, the bodies of Young and his dog were found propped against a tree in the wilderness. Both had been shot dead. Since Young had purchased a gun several days before he disappeared, the police ruled that Young had shot his dog and then committed suicide. However, local villagers who had known Young disputed the conclusion that Young would ever hurt his beloved dog. Rumors started to float around that something more sinister had occurred to Young. Reinhard was taken by the case and the similarities between himself and Young. Not only had they both at one point owned the same store, but if Young had killed himself, then both were going through troubled times. He decided to base the main character in his novel on an amalgamation of Young and himself called Guy Gypsum. Reinhard's daughter, Tiffany, said that her father struggled to separate fact from fiction, and this possibly explains what happened next. 1 week after Young's body was found, Reinhard set off to climb to the top of the nearby Pendleton Mountain. Climbing the mountain was a 6-hour hike, and Reinhard had set off in the late afternoon, meaning he would be walking through the tough rocky terrain at night, which was known to be inhabited by wild animals. This was particularly alarming given Reinhard's lack of experience climbing mountains and his prior fear of heights. Reinhard did not return that night, and the next day over 100 men equipped with trained dogs and helicopters began to search the site for him. The search became one of the biggest in Colorado history, and was only called off when a plane involved in the search crashed, killing one and injuring another. Reinhard was never found. Following his disappearance, people began to question what had happened to Reinhard. There were 2 main theories. The first theory was that Reinhard had been attempting to mimic what had happened to Young. In the last page of his novel manuscript, he had written about how the main character was setting off to walk towards the lush, shadowless Colorado forest above. Reinhard might have been trying to live the events of the character before writing it down. Some even believe that Reinhard is still alive, but after learning about the crashed plane that had been searching for him, decided to flee. In fact, there have been multiple reports of sightings of Reinhard in countries like Mexico since his disappearance. The second theory is that Reinhard was a victim of foul play. Reinhard's own son Kai supports this theory. He believes that Young was harmed by somebody and Reinhard suffered the same fate. He suspects that the shop that both men had owned might have put them at risk. Others argue that if Young had been killed, the person who killed him would view Reinhard and his interest in Young as a threat, so would want to cause him harm. The disappearance of Jared Negrete. Jared Negrete was a 13-year-old Boy Scout who has not been seen since July 19, 1991, when he was separated from his troop of climbers in the San Bernardino National Forest. Tragically, the expedition was Negrete's first overnight backpacking trip with the Boy Scouts. As an inexperienced climber and described as being slightly overweight, climbing to the summit of the 11,500-foot mountain was a tough task. Negrete grew tired at about 1,000 feet from the top and was told to remain behind while the others completed the hike. However, when the troop returned, Negrete was nowhere to be seen. The troop leader immediately led the 5 other scouts back to the base camp and then hiked about 5 miles in the dark to get help. a massive search was launched, consisting of San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies and rescue teams from as far away as Sierra Madre and San Dimas. They searched the 130 square mile area of San Gorgonio wilderness, and on the third day focused their search on a 6 square mile area where one of Negrete's footprints was discovered. In this area, searchers also uncovered beef jerky and candy wrappers they believed to have belonged to Negrete. The most interesting discovery, though, was Negrete's camera. On the camera, there were 12 snapshots. All but one were landscape shots. However, the final image was a close-up self-portrait of Jared, showing only his nose and eyes. The photograph had been taken using flash photography, and Negrete appeared terrified in the image. Some have even claimed to see a pair of eyes behind Negrete, as if he was using the camera to scare off a threat. It is believed that Negrete lost his life by succumbing to the elements or by suffering a fall down the mountain. But over 30 years later, there are no traces of remains of the boy, and Negrete's final moments remain unanswered. The disappearance of Claudia Lawrence. Claudia Lawrence was born and raised in North Yorkshire and worked as a chef for the University of York. Lawrence has not been seen since Wednesday the 18th of March 2009, and her disappearance remains a mystery. On that fateful Wednesday, Lawrence left work at 2:30 p.m. and began walking home. On the walk, she was spotted by a friend who offered her a lift and dropped her off at her cottage on Haworth Road at approximately 2:50 p.m. She was seen posting a letter nearby and then returned home at roughly 3:05 p.m. At around 8 p.m, she texted a friend and accepted a phone call from her mother, in which she was described as sounding cheerful and relaxed. When Lawrence failed to turn up for work the next morning, her manager attempted to call her mobile phone but did not receive an answer. At the same time, evidence shows Lawrence's phone was turned on, only to be switched off deliberately at 12:08 p.m. that same day. Lawrence was due to meet her friend Susie Cooper that evening, but did not turn up. Cooper thought the behaviour was out of Lawrence's character and so contacted Lawrence's father, who broke into her flat. The only items that were missing from Lawrence's home were her rucksack, her mobile phone, and her work uniform. This suggested that Lawrence had left for work that morning. The group decided to contact the police, and a missing persons investigation began. An appeal was released for any further information on Lawrence's last sightings and led to 2 reported potential sightings of Lawrence. The first report came from a cyclist who saw a woman who resembled Lawrence with a man at 5:35 a.m. on the 19th at Melrose Gate, on Lawrence's commute to work. The second sighting was 30 minutes after this, when a commuter noticed a couple who looked like they were arguing outside the University of York, Lawrence's place of work. Additionally, police covered CCTV footage of a suspicious-looking man at the back of Lawrence's house on the evening of the 18th and the early morning of the 19th. The man in the CCTV footage was described as wearing a black hoodie, just as the males in the reported sightings had been. Just 5 weeks into the investigation, police formally classified the case as a suspected murder. Despite over 1,000 statements and searches taking place in the investigation, this male figure has never been unmasked. In 2013, the North Yorkshire Police set up a new unit specifically to look into kidnaps and stalled cases. Lawrence's case fell into the latter category. Using new and advanced techniques, the police were able to find additional fingerprints and a man's DNA on a cigarette end in Lawrence's car. The new discovery led to the arrests of 6 men. However, none were charged. With no conclusion to the case, the 2 main theories of what happened to Lawrence are that she absconded from the UK or she was abducted and killed. The first theory, that Lawrence absconded, is based on the knowledge that Lawrence had visited Cyprus on 5 occasions before her disappearance. The last text message on her phone had come from a male friend in Cyprus. This had led some to conclude that Lawrence chose to disappear of her own accord to the Mediterranean island. However, when the police extended the search for Lawrence to Cyprus, no further information of her whereabouts was revealed. The second and dominant theory is that Lawrence was abducted and killed. On a Crime Watch program focused on her disappearance, Detective Superintendent Ray Galloway revealed that some of Lawrence's relationships had an element of complexity and mystery to them, that were not known to her family or friends. Stories began to spread that Lawrence had pursued relationships with married men. Despite her family and friends publicly refuting the claims, some began to suspect that Lawrence had fallen victim to foul play from one of her scorned lovers. This is supported by the fact that police interviewed every male regular of one York pub as to whether they had a romantic relationship with Lawrence. Others argue that it was convicted woman killer Christopher Halliwell who is responsible for Lawrence's abduction. Halliwell abducted and killed his second known victim exactly 2 years after Lawrence's disappearance. Psychological research has shown that killers are triggered often by dates, so Lawrence's disappearance would fit into his offending pattern, and there is one reported sighting of Lawrence and Halliwell together. Lawrence's own mother believes Halliwell is responsible for her daughter's disappearance. She has publicly criticised the police for not spending more money and time investigating whether Halliwell was responsible for the crime. Over 10 years later, what happened to Lawrence remains unanswered. But what do you make of these mysterious disappearances? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.